So desk setup is an interesting place to start. There's lots of things out there as to how you should set your desk up. The screen should be at eye level, elbows should be at 90 degrees, palms should be flat onto the desk. Ideally, you want to be swapping your mouse from side to side if you possibly can. You want to make sure that you're moving from standing to sitting and sitting to standing as much as you can. If your desk can't move so that you can stand at your desk, then do make sure that every 30 minutes you're getting up, moving around, and then sitting back down again. The thing that people don't cover actually is how you sit in your chair and what chair you choose as to when you're working. So we've been doing lots of video consults, and it's been quite interesting looking at how people work at home, because we've made the assumptions that when we say, yeah, I work from home, that you're like, oh, well, you must have set your desk up properly, and yeah, fantastic. And I recently assessed a CEO of a small organisation in Surrey, and he was working on his bedside table. That was his desk. So he was sat on his bed, working on the bedside table. If you can imagine it, he's perched on his bed, he's twisted onto this bedside table, and you sort of sit there and you're like, I was like, is that really your desk setup? And to be fair, he's like, not normally, but I've got the kids at home, so they're using the office. So I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but it kind of doesn't, because he was naturally phoning up with mid-back pain. And he was getting mid-back pain because he's sitting in this twisted hunched position over a bedside table using a laptop while his kids were in the office using his setup to do their schoolwork. And it dawned on me that actually when we expect people to be working at home, we think that people have set their desks up in a way that hopefully is as good as they can possibly get. But often people are just making do because, particularly at this time with lockdown, we are all making do. We're basically all thrown into a different situation. We're like, right, in that case, I'm going to work like this, and away we go. So chair, for a start, is the majority of people are using dining room chairs. If you have got an office chair, that's fantastic, but the majority of people are just perching on whatever chair they've got to hand. How you sit in any chair is quite important, because what you really want when you sit in the chair is for the weight or the pressure of your weight to go through the sitting bones of your bottom. So if you're sitting in a chair and you put your bottom into the chair and you find yourself on the fleshy bits of your butt cheeks, so basically sitting into your glute muscles, then while it's comfortable for a short period of time, it's actually putting the pelvis into a position where it rocks backwards slightly and puts a lot of pressure on the low back. And that's where, as you sit for longer and longer periods of time, the back starts to get more and more achy, and you can't break that cycle, because every time you sit down, your pelvis rolls backwards, you put strain in the low back, the muscles have to work harder. So there's a big correlation with how you're sitting in the chair and how much back pain you get over a period of time of sitting. So when you think about sitting, the great thing about Field of Fitness training setup is that you do plenty of squats. I imagine as well online at the moment, Dan, you're doing lots of squats and getting people working their glutes nicely. So if we are squatting, then what we do when we squat is we're trying to make sure that we engage your glutes, we get your bottom going backwards, and that's exactly the same thing you should do when you sit into a chair. So when you do sit in a chair, the ideal thing is to really stick your butt out in order to get into the chair and have the back of your bottom cheek hit the back of the chair and then slide down the chair so it comes to a rest. Because if you're doing that, it's naturally putting the pelvis into the right position, that the weight and pressure of your body is going through the bones at the bottom of the pelvis, rather than allowing the pelvis to rock backwards. If you are sitting for any period of time, you'll naturally slide your bottom forwards anyway. Yeah? And we all end up sitting in this sort of slump position, looking at the screen. It's a naughty position. We all know it's a naughty position. So when we know we're in that naughty position, what we do is we go, well, I must sit upright. So then we arch the back slightly and we go into a more upright position. You're actually better off getting your bottom adjusted on the chair. So if you felt yourself go into that slide, the ideal thing to do is sit up a little bit, put your hand underneath your butt cheek and literally lift the butt cheek and slide it backwards. Put your other hand underneath the other butt cheek and slide that one backwards until you can feel the back of your butt cheek, again, pressing into the back of the chair. By doing it, you reposition the pelvis, you start to put the pressure through the bony bits at the bottom of the pelvis rather than the fleshy bits behind the pelvis, and it allows you to efficiently put weight down through the chair so you get a better reactive force coming up through the body. While the pelvis gets rocked backwards, the strain goes through the low back, and that's the fastest way of getting a really nice low back pain. So third part of that is choosing your chair. Make sure your chair is right for you. If you need to use a wedge, then do use a wedge. And you'll know that if when you move your hips into flexions, you're bringing knee up towards your chest. How far does the knee go, does the thigh come up before you have to start rocking the pelvis backwards? Most of us of a certain age, so effectively above 35, are starting to get a bit of wear and tear into the joints. If you're getting any wear and tear into the hips in particular, what you often lose is that full range of flexion. And if you're losing that full range of flexion, so the thigh when it comes up gets to a certain point and then the pelvis has to move as well, the ideal thing is to set your chair up so you've got a wedge, so it's taking the pressure off the hips and the pelvis. If you've got a 90-degree chair and you're sitting and trying to sit at 90 degrees and your hips can't get to 90 degrees in the way they bend, it's going to rock the pelvis backwards, it's going to put a strain through the low back. It's not a great idea. So the exercises that the guys do at Field of Fitness and squats and getting glutes working is all fantastic for posture, for controlling these areas. But the practicalities of sitting for any period of time means you want to be sitting in a good position or the best position you can, because we're all working from home more and more and more. We're all in a non-ergonomic desk setup. So the better you can make it, the better off you are. So that's the overview of sitting and why people are getting so much low back pain. It's not a very exciting topic, I'm afraid, but I thought it was probably a good topic to start with, given the time we're in at the moment. And certainly as a physio, I'm used to working all day, every day, standing on my feet, moving people around, couch, off the couch, up and down. Having to be at a computer screen, I'm learning a lot, because I'm learning what it feels like to be sat at a desk for long periods of time. I'm learning what it feels like to work from home. And I've got to say, it's a big shock to my system, but as I'm learning, I'm trying to put that learning out to everybody else as well, to make sure that everybody's got the same understanding that I have. The second part of what I'm going to talk about today is running. So I'm certainly running more at the moment. As I go out, and in the last 6 weeks I've been out, there's been more and more and more people running. So when we are running, there are three things that are interesting to think about. Number one is, if you do look down at your legs when you're running, do both feet land pointing straight ahead? Or does one foot slightly turn out compared to the other? So particularly Achilles pain, ankle difficulties, that's the likelihood, is that when you're landing, one foot is actually landing slightly turned out. And if you are landing slightly turned out, you start to have this asymmetrical movement of the legs, where one is going in a straight line, but the other one is going out and coming in, going out and coming in. There can be multiple reasons behind that, be it a problem at the foot, a problem at the knee, a problem at the hip, or a problem further up. But if you are doing it, it's a great idea to then have a conversation with either myself or Dan, John, the guys at Field of Fitness, because you want to make sure that you're training the system so the foot is pointing in a straight direction, and that you're getting an idea of how to run and lunge with the foot pointing straight ahead rather than it turning outwards. The second thing is, what's your balance like one side compared to the other? The number of times I watch runners and they're running lopsided and they're actually landing heavily on one side compared to the other. So if you stand on your right leg for 10 seconds and close your eyes, and then you stand your left leg for 10 seconds and close your eyes, is one easier than the other? Because whichever one is easiest is the side that you'll probably land most heavily on, and it's actually the one that's going to cause a problem. Now, the third thing is what happens with the upper body. And this is fascinating when you watch people run and how their arms swing and move. And there's a lovely guy that I met who's over in our Walton practice, and he's a good rugby player, and he was getting pain when he was running 5 kilometres. He could play rugby with no problems, but he'd run 5Ks and he'd get a knee pain. Now, he was right-handed and he liked to carry the rugby ball in his right hand as well. So when he runs, even when he's running not playing rugby, he runs as if he's carrying a rugby ball. So his arm swing was asymmetrical. He had one arm that was going forwards and backwards, and the other arm was coming across his body. He also liked to use that side to tackle, so he was a right side dominant rugby player. So when you looked at how his legs moved, he had one leg that slightly turned out compared to the other. He had a bit of a restriction in the movement of his hips. But actually, when you got him to contract the muscles around his scapula and try and pull his shoulders into a good position, the hips moved absolutely symmetrically. So it was the relationship between his upper body and his lower body. That his upper body, because it was held in a certain muscular position, the lower body was reacting to it by tensing in a certain way, which was having a knock-on effect to when he runs. So when you are out running, do think about your arms. Think about how they're moving, how they're driving. And if you do have any previous ailments, pains, problems, sprains, etc., they will have had a knock-on effect. And the knock-on effect is important. So classically, this is where it comes around in one big circle. If we're working from home more, we're in this position more, we're maybe reaching for the mouse and we're getting tension around this area, it will have an effect on how you run. And it has a big effect on how you run, because if this area is getting tight and it's not able to move properly when we're into a turn, then the bottom area and how you land your feet gets grossly affected. So, mini takeaway things from just my little bit today, and then we can have a conversation about anything we want to directly after this. Sitting wise, make sure your bottom is right at the back of the chair. Make sure you're putting pressure through the sitting bones of the pelvis rather than putting it through the fleshy part of your bottom. This is the same at a work chair as it is basically on a sofa. So if you're on the sofa and you find yourself slouching into that sofa position, prop your low back up with some cushions. Give yourself some support into that low back, because the more your back goes into this flexed position, the pelvis rocks backwards, the more pressure you're putting onto the bottom of that low back. Sitting wide as well, do look how your desk is set up. So hopefully your arms are at 90 degrees bend at the elbows. You're not reaching for a mouse. The screen is at eye height. So you're not having to look down or look up all of the time. Running wise, have a look at your foot or have a look at your feet. Does one foot turn out more than the other? Because if the foot does turn out more than the other, do we want to practice making sure that the feet are landing straight ahead? But that can be grossly affected by what is happening with balance. So test your balance, stand on one leg with your eyes closed, stand your other legs with your eyes closed. Which one's different? Whichever one doesn't feel as good as the other, practice on it. Stand on it, practice on that side, get your balance used to being on the side you didn't like standing on. Stand on it when you do your teeth, stand on it when you're waiting for the kettle to boil, stand on it when you're stirring your tea. Any time is a good time. And the third thing is, how's the upper body moving? So the simplest test that we found for this is if you put both hands out in front of you and then you take your right hand straight back and then bring it back to level with the left hand, the left hand straight back and bring it to level with the right hand. Which one feels easiest? Is there a restriction one side compared to the other? Because if there is a restriction one side compared to the other, mine's on my right side, but then I've had a shoulder operation, so I have an excuse. So my right side, when it comes back, it doesn't want to move into that position. So when I run, I've got to concentrate on trying to pull that shoulder backwards as I'm running, rather than driving the arms forwards. And that, in a nutshell, is everything I have to talk about in a short period of time.